All right, guys. Here are your notes for section 3.8 on inference for experiments. Inference meaning what kind of stuff can we conclude? What can we take away from the experiment and say that we think is true? We covered this before, but I just want to review them real quick. The three principles of experimental design and why we use them. Control. We use a control group so that we can compare the results from the treatment group with the results from the control group, which we also call baseline data. All right, the reason that we have a control group is that we have something to compare it with. Random assignment. Why do we use random assignment? We randomly assign experiments into treatment groups and control those groups so that any other variables that could be lurking variables, they will be evened out. So the two groups are as equivalent as possible until one of them gets a treatment. That's what random assignment is for. It's because we're not good, we overthink things, and we would try to put people in different groups so that we'd try to keep them equal, we'd screw something up. So random assignment does a better job than we would at trying to make the two groups as equivalent as possible. And then repetition, we use a large number of experimental units in each group to allow the random assignment to even out the presence of any outside variables. All right, there you go. There's the three principles of design. Control, random assignment to make groups as even as possible, and replication used in a large number of experimental units so that this random assignment really does get to work itself out so that they are equal. So if you use a large number of people, we've evened out any outside variables into both groups being similar. So these two work together really well. Okay, here's your first experimental design, the completely randomized design. The completely randomized design. What do I mean by that? I mean, there's no order whatsoever. Once you get your sample, you completely randomly put them into the two treatment groups, or if there's 3 or 4 treatment groups. But you don't put any order to it. You just take your group, randomize them, and put them into groups. In this experimental design, the sample is simply randomly assigned from the get-go into all treatment groups. There's no other structure. So there's this one example from the last section, I think, where you have 22 volunteer students, and some of them have caffeine, and then some of them don't, and then you take a, blood pressure. So here, I'm going to say that we start with 20 students. This is how you outline a design. I'm going to take these 20 students, and I'm going to immediately just put them right into random assignment. That is how a completely randomized design works. A random assignment. So what happens is, with that random assignment, we get group 1. That's with 10 students. And we get group 2. That's with 10 other students. What happens with them? This would be treatment 1, and that would be maybe caffeine. See if I spell that right, I don't know. And then the next one would be treatment 2, and that would be no caffeine. Now we got something we can compare people with, right? So you bring them back and you compare results. Compare results, that's what we're doing there at the end. Okay, I'm going to flip over to page 2 just to show you guys that the next thing we want to do is look at a book example. Grab yourself a Libro and go to page 236, and let's talk about what distracts drivers. I think we're going to look at an example of a completely randomized design. Is talking on the cell phone while driving more distracting than talking to a passenger? David Strayer and his colleagues at University of Utah used 48 undergraduate students as subjects in an experiment. The researchers randomly assigned half the students to drive in a simulator while talking on a cell phone, and the other half talking to a passenger. One response variable was whether or not they stopped at a rest area that was specified by researchers before the simulation started. Okay, so they didn't break these people into any groups other than, we started with 48 of them, we went straight to the random assignment with no order whatsoever. 24 of them got the cell phone, 24 of them got a passenger, and we compare to see if there's any differences. Okay, that's a completely randomized design. The second I can statement for this, the second learning target here, is I can explain the concept of statistical significance with an experiment. That's not easy, okay? This is another one of those, it's actually a continuation of the conversation we had about how weird is weird and what percent do we need and using simulations to make decisions about that kind of stuff. So this is not easy. Here we go. Once you get to the point where you're going to compare the treatment to the control group, so you got your sample correctly, you did a randomized grouping into the two groups. Now you're going to look at your two results. You have to be ready to answer the following question. Are my results weird enough for me to say that they are so weird that they're actually weird? Or are they just a little weird? Now, that's the conversation we had about, are you surprised if there's a 50% chance of rain and it rains versus is there a 5% chance of it rains? That's the difference. We're getting at that concept right there. So question number one, if there's a 40% chance that it snows, instead of rain I went with snow, look at that, and it snows. There's a 40% chance and it happens. Is that weird? I'm going to say no. It's not likely. It wasn't supposed to happen, but there was a pretty good chance that it might happen. So if it happens, I'm not that surprised. If there's a 2% chance that it snows, and it actually snows, is that weird? I'm going to say yes. So there's a cutoff point in there somewhere. There has to be a percent that can serve as a cutoff. A point where we're going to say, yep, the fact that this happened and there was a little chance of it happening, that definitely means something is worth talking about here. For us to be able to call something weird enough, I'm going to write something here. For us to call something weird enough to be weird. Some result in some study was so unlikely to happen and actually happened, that's enough for us to start drawing conclusions that, for example, the treatment changed behavior in somebody. Okay, definition. When an observed difference in responses between the variables, and what I mean by that is the treatment group and the control group, is too large, the difference is too large to be explained by the chance variation from random assignment. See, when I randomly assign people, I could have accidentally put groups that aren't equivalent, and so there's a difference between them because of the chance assignment, not because of the treatment. But what I'm saying here is when the difference in responses is so large that that's not why it is, we say the result is statistically significant. And what does that mean to us? If we're doing an experiment and the treatment group is quite different than the control group, if that difference is large enough and we call it statistically significant, now we can start leaning towards saying that the treatment caused the change. Let's go to the next page.